rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view.
Hey everybody, this is Razib with Josiah Neely of R Street for the conversation episode number 18. So again, I'm going to remind people, please rate and review us on the various platforms or subscribe, on whatever video, tube, etc. service you use. And also, if you want the gated content, you're gonna have to pay for it. We've decided to keep it simple here. We're never gonna release the gated content. So for those of you, and I know like I can look at the overlap, like about half of you have come through my other podcast slash Substack, and you know that I ungate things after 2 weeks. The reason I do that there is I don't feel ethically comfortable permanently gating someone's content because, I mean, that's just weird to me. If it's me and I'm doing a monologue, I will gate part of it forever. I don't care. Me and Josiah and I, however you want to say it, we've just agreed, let's just keep it simple and not do all these like little gimmicks. Like we're going to give you about usually we're giving you an hour of free content, and then after that, it's gated. And if you want it, you want it. And if you don't, you don't. It's not a big deal. Also,
the best stuff is paywalled, though. The best stuff is paywalled.
Yeah. Yes. Also, obviously, I am in a different undisclosed location in the city of San Francisco right now. Just so people know. But I do want to thank my friend out there whose condo I am staying at, because this is, I think I like the acoustics here, actually. I like the acoustics of this place.
Who's that guy? There's some guy online where he will take, like someone will post a picture or a video, and then he's like, I used the angle of the sun to figure out that it was this, and then based on the, interior design. Yeah.
Not that it matters that this location get doxxed, so I'm not going to say whose place this is, or it's somebody that
I think Peter would be cool about it, if it came out. So,
someone's a comedian here. Someone is a comedian. All right. So, I guess we want to talk about Matt Gaetz. So we're going to talk about Matt Gaetz, and then we're going to talk about some non-political stuff, which we've been promising we were going to do. Since before the election, after the election, we were gonna, say we're gonna do it, and we're on podcast 18. We've gone for a while now. We got a bunch more. Yeah, we got over 30 to go as part of our commitment to you, the listener. But so we're gonna talk about Matt Gaetz, which is kind of a food fight. I will let you, actually, Josiah, I think you should tell the real story behind Matt Gaetz, which is kind of what everybody knows if they dig around Greenberg. Matt Gaetz, here's the issue with him. I don't have a problem with him, actually, as such. He does look like a DC villain. And that's kind of an optical problem when it comes to these ethical peccadillos with his hairline, and his Botox. And, he's married to Ginger Lucky. She's younger than him. I personally do not judge. I do not judge older men dating younger women. Just gonna put that out there. So there's gonna be no moral condemnation from me. But there's been a lot of kind of like a lot of gross stuff going on, and Gaetz, he didn't set himself up well because of his earlier behavior. And so the problem that happens with Matt Gaetz, I would say, is people don't have that much bandwidth to pay attention to everything, and they're like, oh, he hires prostitutes, and he's a sex trafficker. That's what we heard on MSNBC, and that's all they know. And then Republicans, he did brag about his exploits, so to speak. you know, before. And so it's like it creates this constellation that's like not very positive for him. But the true story is it's kind of messed up, and Gaetz is not as culpable. There's a reason that the feds didn't press charges, right? Like, just why don't you tell what's going on here?
Well, I mean, I don't even know if I can tell the story because there was a very long Twitter thread about it, which people were sharing around, and like is often the case with these things, like there's like I can follow it for a while, and then it gets so convoluted. I'm like, wait, what's going on? So, and it's also we don't entirely know what happened, right? There's like secret allegations or leaks. We do know, I guess in 2000 it came out that Gaetz was being investigated by the FBI, and people were talking about prostitution. People were talking about having sex with a minor. People were talking about sex trafficking which I gather was because he and this person like got on a plane together, and when you cross state or international lines for immoral purposes, that's a Mann Act thing. So there was a lot of that. Gaetz, I think there are kind of a couple lines of defense. One, Gaetz, he went on Tucker's very strange interview talking about it, but most of what he said, many of the facts there seem to be true, where someone approached Gaetz's father, Don Gaetz, who's like a rich guy, and said, hey, if you will give us $25 million, then we will make this investigation of your son for sex trafficking go away, right? And Don Gaetz is like, what investigation for sex trafficking? And they're like, exactly. So apparently he wore a wire, or was going to wear a wire. I think he did meet with the guys wearing a wire. They never actually exchanged any money. It kind of got blown up. And there's other stuff about like how they were going to try and use the money in order to free this guy who's been captive in Iran for like 15 years, who is allegedly intelligence operative. And then there's other stuff, it gets very complicated. Israeli intelligence pops up for some reason. So I don't even know about all that. The FBI investigated him for, I think, 3 years. They did not end up charging him with anything because they said that the witnesses all had serious credibility problems, right? And then there was like the House Ethics Committee. They got involved. They took testimony from various people. Supposedly they were going to release a report, and Gaetz resigned when he got nominated for AG. He resigned from Congress, which like moots the report because they lose their jurisdiction. Various stuff from the report got leaked anyway. It's a little hard for me to make sense of some of it. Like, I think like one of the big things was like, apparently people were saying, oh, well, he was Venmoing money. He Venmoed women money for sex, something like that, right? That's the allegation. And there was like a chart that showed, it had like a picture of Gaetz, and then there were like arrows pointing at different people with amounts, but everything else was blacked out. So it's like, okay, he Venmoed, like just from the chart, all you can see is he Venmoed money to people, right? I Venmoed money to you, Razib. It was not for sex. I want to put that on the record. So he, of course, I think he basically denies everything. It's hard to say like what's just false, what is true but kind of distasteful versus, illegal or seriously unethical behavior. I will say, even beyond that, like that's obviously an issue, but a lot of people didn't like Matt Gaetz even before that stuff came out for other reasons, right? He has a kind of, he's not like a play nice with others kind of guy, right? So a lot of people have found him kind of abrasive. They didn't like his outspoken defense of Trump. he is not a team player. So, for example, one of the things that he is really big on, and I think he and AOC sponsored a bill about this, is so-called insider trading for congressional members, where if you're on one of these committees in Congress, you get advanced information about something that's going to happen, whether it's like DOJ is going to object to this merger or there's going to be a pandemic or whatever. And then you make, you sell your stocks or you buy your stocks. If you look, there are like a lot of congressmen, Nancy Pelosi, other people, they do very well in stock trades. And it kind of, if you follow it, it kind of seems like they are relying on like non-public information. So, he wants to ban that, but he was like calling out Republicans and like Republican leadership, other people for that, which people don't like that. He also was responsible for getting rid of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. And, I think so that also made him a bunch of enemies. So he's got a lot of enemies. He was not well liked, I think, within at least the House and some of the Senate, had some issues with him as well. I've always say, like, personally, if you, whatever people think about the personal aspect, if you just look at Gaetz's policy agenda or his legislative record or whatever, to me, it seems pretty good. I mean, the things that he wants to do, restore regular order to the House, actually have budgets, amendments, that like this it's sort of goo-goo, good government type of stuff, really. And then I think his, the legislation that he entered, like he does a lot of environmental legislation, animal rights stuff, weed legalization, which is maybe not my favorite thing, but it's, he's not an extremist in that sense. He's like, and I've actually, he would go on Clubhouse. And so I talked to him a couple times on Clubhouse or listened to him on Clubhouse. He's obviously a very smart guy, and very thoughtful. And he's not like, I wouldn't describe him as having like extremist politics or anything. It just didn't, there's just nothing in there as far as that goes. He has been a staunch defender of the president and, objecting to like what he perceived as political persecution by the DOJ, by the FBI, other things like that. So, so obviously they felt that they didn't have the votes to confirm him and that it was just going to be a time suck, right? So he withdrew. Trump, announced that his replacement as AG nominee is going to be Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi's fine. So I don't know that it's going to be what the long-term impact of it will be, in terms of like the course of the administration. I don't know what he's going to do next either, but that's kind of the situation as I see it.
Okay, so one thing that I do want to put in here, I think, a lot of our listeners are more sophisticated, I think, than the usual political, follower of political news. But, I'm just want to reiterate, there is what you see reported externally about somebody and what people say in public. And then there is what they think about them and the interpersonal relationships that it's like, you're not going to find out that, oh, he's kind of a dick he doesn't say hi to people on the hallway. He doesn't do whatever. I don't know. And there's all these little things that human beings do to kind of grease the social wheels. And some people don't do it, and some people do it. So, for example, John McCain, 20 years ago, when he was running, over 20 years ago, when he was running against George W. Bush, it was famously observed that most of his Senate colleagues endorsed George W. Bush because John McCain was kind of an irascible figure in the Senate, and he did have some close friends, but he was tight with like a few senators, and then everybody else, he was just like, I'm the maverick. Which played well in the media, but the Senate is not a place where people really want to deal with mavericks. So they didn't really like him that much. And so that explained the endorsements, not ideology. And there wasn't that much of an ideological difference back then between McCain and Bush anyways. It was mostly that McCain was much more explicit about bombing other countries, wanting to. He was hardcore neocon back then, and Bush was like a little bit more humble foreign policy. So personalities can affect how people are treated by both the media and also by the quotes people give, right? So there are some people who are just not liked, and they get a lot of negative quotes, and nobody defends them, but it has nothing to do with the substance of what they're being accused of often. And so that's, I think, the issue that's almost impossible for humans to frankly separate it, but that is like a fundamental reality. And Matt Gaetz, I think the idea you're more plugged into like nitty gritty electoral politics or like the Republican institutional party, but he was on to better things. He was always going to be either some big figure on Fox News or a senator or governor in Florida. Right. He was not going to be just like a backbencher who put in his dues. And so obviously that rubs people the wrong way. I mean, I'm sure some people have seen the YouTube videos or the Twitter videos of Kevin McCarthy basically bitching him out on the House floor with a bunch of other people. It was like very, very high school, like kind of like, dynamics, very immature dynamics that are going on there. But that has nothing to do with his policy positions. And you were saying he doesn't seem that strange, policy wise. Yeah, he's not actually particularly conservative. When that Democratic Congresswoman got like involved with the throuple that was exposed, he defended her, probably because
I mean,
and also Lee Fong has been like writing many defenses of that case. Now it could be because Lee and him have partied. No, I'm just joking. I'm just making that up.
Let me give one other example, which is a little off the beaten track. But a few years ago, Sacha Baron Cohen, he did one of his show, and he did where he like pretends to be someone else. And this particular one, he was pretending to be like sort of Israeli gun rights activist, and so he went around to Congress, and he had this program. He said that like in Israel, the way they prevented school shootings is they gave guns to kindergartners and preschoolers, right? And they had like a program to train preschoolers in the use of firearms. Okay, so he just goes, into like different congressional offices, and he gets a bunch of Republicans to basically endorse this program, sight unseen. So like Trent Lott says he's for it. Joe Walsh, who was a Republican congressman, now he's like a big Never Trump guy, did like a PSA for it, a bunch of other people like that. But they do have like one scene in there is they go into Matt Gaetz's office, and he's like, "You want me to say on television that I support giving guns to 3-year-olds?" And the Sacha Baron Cohen character's like, "Yes." He's like, typically a congressman doesn't just hear about a program for the first time and indicate where he supports it. So he's like he's smart, he's not like just a knee jerk guy. Cohen was like, he's the one guy in that video. Maybe they went around to a bunch of other offices and a bunch of other people said no. I don't know why they would put him in there other that, but I just point out that like, that's, I think, there's a side of Gaetz, which is, I think, why he's got fans as well, that isn't reflected in some of the media coverage. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of Gaetz, he's obviously a complicated figure, and a lot of politicians are kind of boring. He's not boring. He's married to Palmer Lucky's sister. He was friends with this Greenberg guy, and he might not have been involved in all of the in any of the sordid things that Greenberg did. But like, what are you doing hanging out with this type of guy? It's just like, it's a lack of judgment, especially if you're a politician, especially if you're, a representative in Congress, to hang out with like such,
I mean, let me say other like I'm not Matt Gaetz's defense attorney by any means, but I will say like it's also not unusual. Like there are a lot of members in Congress who are kind of partying and having sex with various sketchy people and so on and so forth, right? And so I don't think Gaetz is at all unusual in that. Maybe he was just a little bit too open about it up front, like a lot of people they
Well,
do a better
wasn't
job
just
of hiding it and like putting on like a different front or whatever.
yeah, he wasn't discreet.
Yeah, he's not discreet, but I don't. I mean, like it's Congress. I don't think people are that shocked at the idea of a congressman. I mean, like Ted Kennedy, was beloved in the Senate, right? And it's not like people were thinking that Ted Kennedy was not involved in similar sorts of things, right? They all and
Yeah.
probably even bragging about it as well.
Well, I mean, so aside from Chappaquiddick, which everyone knows, I think Chris Dodd of Connecticut, one of the reasons he did not run for re-election is because like the sandwich incident.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
But Kennedy's dead by then, so he wasn't culpable. He wasn't going to be holding the bag for it. So it's like, and the sandwich incident is just like they basically smashed a waitress between the two of them.
they
It's like
they're in a restaurant. They grabbed a waitress and like got on either side. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
but it was just like what, like the fact that they thought they could do things like this is
Well,
like.
I presume they had been drinking as well, but
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. And so I think those are things that you go after people for. Some people I'm sure do generally object to it, but a lot of people I would think, especially in the Congress, they really dislike Gaetz for other reasons, right? And so that's a convenient thing to go after him for. But it's like, again, if he they did not feel that way about Ted Kennedy, etc. Right?
Well, I mean, I guess the only other angle that the Gaetz nomination is, the whole idea is like, did Trump actually think he was going to pass muster? Because he had to, and like people were saying that from the beginning that of the people nominated, either Gaetz or RFK were going to be the ones that were just not going to make it, and he didn't even. I mean, and Gaetz has resigned, but do you have an update? Is he coming back to Congress?
No, people on X were saying, "Oh, well, he's only resigned from this Congress, so he can come back." That's not the way it works. They're going to have a special election. He could run in the special election, I suppose, and if he wins, he could come back to Congress that way. But otherwise, no, he's out. He's resigned. He's gone. I don't know what he'll do next, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of opportunities. Obviously, he does come from well-off background, but he has good comm skills. He's good on TV. I think we're going to be seeing him on Fox News and other places. Just seems like that's a good skill set for him. And now he's got the visibility, and also now that he's not in Congress, he can just defend himself however he wants to. It's like, who cares?
Maybe he'll join Doge. Maybe he could join Doge. By the way,
yeah.
I know this is not on our list, but I did want to say, because we've been doing this podcast for a while. It's been doing pretty well, and recently, like Sarah Hayter and Megan Daum, they announced that they were not going to do their podcast anymore. It's kind of sad. I don't know exactly how much overlap we have in audiences or whatever, but I feel like we're getting a good stride. And then I saw, Vivek Ramaswamy announced that he and Elon were starting their own weekly podcast to talk about, they're going to call it the Dogecast. And, it's a brown guy, a geeky looking white guy. They're doing a weekly podcast. I think they're stealing our bit, Razib. They're stealing we should look into, I don't know if there's like copyright infringement or trademark or whatever it is, but, I don't know. like I feel like they could cut into our impact, right? What do you think?
Imitation is it's flattery, right? So
Right.
I don't know. I think we have a head start,
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
right.
maybe we are in it to win it. I don't know how long Vivek and Elon are going to be doing the podcast and the Doge thing before they move on to other uh yeah yes
Other planets, other
yeah there's a lot of ways we can go with that. Like I do, it was it's like I believe I think your hypothesis that he's an alien and that he wants to go back is actually not a like totally crazy idea at this point,
uh-huh.
because he's the number
His
one
name is
Diablo 4
Elon,
player. He's the number one Diablo 4 player in the world. Like
right?
what? I mean, like there's just all sorts of weird things about him. Like an alien would do really well on a video game, I think. I don't know.
Well, quite possibly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So. All right. So I guess at this point, like we should talk about energy, which is something that a listener, viewer, follower, whatever, wanted us to talk about. You're an energy guy. That's it's your bread and butter. It's how you know pay the bills with our street, right? So a couple of years ago, so just to start out with, a couple of years ago, energy is one of those things you don't notice until you don't have it. So
Right.
a couple of years ago, we had a blizzard. My place like lost power for 3.5 days. I think your place was okay, but your water was an issue.
Right.
That was pretty traumatic, and that's when everybody, because a lot of people didn't realize it. Texas has its own grid, and so
Yeah.
that means that we could not lean on the rest of the country. So there's an East Coast grid and a West Coast grid, and then there's a Texas grid.
Right.
And so the Texas grid allows us to be more flexible and kind of do some innovative things, but that also has problems because there's less of a buffer in terms of leaning on other states for resources when we were having problems. So I mean, what happened from what I remember was the turbines, the wind power and other things in the Rio Grande Valley, they froze because it was so cold. So all of that energy dropped.
Well, everything
And
kind of froze.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, also there were people like John Stokes. I did a podcast with John Stokes about it, and he's a bit of a survivalist. But his oil or his gas froze, or like it
Right. Yeah.
solidified.
Diesel. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, diesel. It solidified. So that was like just unexpected. So I saw something on Twitter where people were talking about a lot of people they love. It's snowing in the north. I don't like snow. I don't like cold, but it's snowing in Chicago and other places. People are like, oh, I love winter, and like it's their favorite. It's your favorite season or whatever. And someone, I think Tom Russell, pointed out, people don't really love winter. They just have an excuse now not to leave their house, and they just keep things at the house. And you could tell like people would love winter if they loved it without heating. It's like they don't
Yeah.
really love winter. They love, the ice outside, but it's really warm and toasty inside. And you can just kind of cuddle up and, with a hot cup of coffee and,
Right.
Christmas music and all these things. And so this is just like a long way to say, energy is important. We take it for granted. We take it for granted right now. I have a light on here. I also have a battery and a laptop. So there's Rod Dreher years ago. It was like 10 years ago. It was like, oh, like we don't have like flying cars and all those things. Like, yeah, that's fair, Rod. But like in a lot of ways, we do live in an age of miracles and we take it for granted. And it's just important to remember it sometimes.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. Uh, energy, like, and all sorts of things that you don't even think about, like medicine, food. Like, we wouldn't be able to have, like, I still like, it is kind of, it remains amazing to me the extent to which like people were able to survive without refrigeration. If you think about that, like salt as a meat, like we think of salt as something that you use to make your steak taste a little more flavorful, as opposed to like being a preservative. I don't even want to think about. I don't even want to think about that, like having to eat the steak, that you've just like salted up. after however many long. But anyway, we did get a comment asking me to like go into a little bit more detail about my thoughts on climate and energy and whatnot. And even though I do work for, I work for the R Street Institute, that's my day job. But we haven't talked a lot about it because this is not a R Street product. I don't think normally we don't even mention, who I work for. If we do, I got to give like a disclaimer that I'm speaking for
You don't-
myself,
Yeah.
R Street, it's kind of an interesting organization. It's a think tank, right leaning, free market oriented. It was founded 12 years ago as an independent organization. Actually, prior to that, we had been a department within a larger organization called the Heartland Institute, and we were focused on insurance reform, so property like home insurance, fire, flood, auto insurance, that sort of thing, but mostly houses and structures. And Heartland, in addition to us, the thing that they were mostly known for was, climate change skepticism, kind of casting doubt on the idea that human activities are making the earth warmer and other stuff like that. And so they did a billboard campaign where they had like a bunch of billboards with the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, Charles Manson, Osama bin Laden, other people like that. And these billboards, you would just have like a picture of whoever it was. And then the text said, I believe in global warming. Do you? Right. So this caused a lot of controversy, because at the time, Ted Kaczynski and Osama bin Laden were seen as bad people. Now you go to TikTok and, people are reading bin Laden's letter and, various people have rediscovered Uncle Ted. But so this caused like a big firestorm. And one thing is, like we were always a free market oriented thing, but if you're working in insurance, property casualty insurance, you just can't be credible if you are, casting doubt on climate change, say, right? Because that's like a big part of their thing, hurricanes, sea level rise, all that sort of stuff. So we kind of split off. I say I was not there at the time. But R Street kind of split off to be its own organization and decided, in addition to the insurance stuff, they're going to work on other issues. One of it was climate from, more like a realist free market perspective, right? So like up until that point, a lot of the like conservative work on climate change was just like focused on, casting doubt on various scientific conclusions or other things like that. And we didn't think that was like the most helpful. R Street didn't think that was, and I agreed, didn't think that was the most helpful way forward. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to join the organization, because we were pretty rare back then in taking that position. For myself, like I've never been a climate change skeptic, like to the, from whenever I first looked into the issue, it's like, yeah, okay, we've known for, over 100 years that, carbon dioxide and other things trap heat in the atmosphere. So that's not a surprise. You pump a lot more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's going to get warmer. So I wasn't a climate change skeptic, but I was, and still am to a large degree, kind of a government skeptic. I don't think like a lot of the stuff that has either been done or proposed to be done to try and solve the issue of climate change is just not effective, not realistic, not cost effective, etc. So we have proposed various things to try and deal with that. And one of the things that we really decided to focus on was the electric system and make sure that the electric system is more efficient, that you can integrate more clean energy, those sorts of things. So that's kind of what I do, my day job is work on that stuff. I could go into tedious amounts of detail if people really
Yeah,
want.
let me just jump in here and let me just note just a few how to organize. I think the way people think about it. This is a big problem. So I think in 2013, it was in 2013. It was the spring of 2013, or was it spring of 2012? Wow, it might have been a while ago. I think it was the spring of 2012. So I was invited to I guess like the American Humanist Secular, I don't know, some secular Free Inquiry. They published Free Inquiry. Anyway, so it's one of these secular humanist groups, and they wanted a conservative secular person, and so they went on to Google, and I came up. I'm not joking,
Yeah.
I think there's more now, but back then it was not
Right.
as common. But anyway, so I went and I was on various panels about politics and religion, and it was mostly liberal, although I do have to say there's a lot of old people there. So some of the people were liberal, but they didn't realize that people would be very upset if you would say that I just try to judge people by the content of their color, not the or content of their character, not the color of their skin. And then that was a super racist comment. And so there were some younger people, especially younger, there was a young black woman that got up to denounce this old white liberal, and he was super confused. So there was a lot of generational conflicts I saw there. But Ron Bailey of Reason was there, and I was there. We were kind of representing the conservatives, I guess. Ron more libertarian than me. But one of the issues that kept coming up is people would bring up climate change, global warming, and they would mix their policy prescription to fix the problem with the underlying. Well, let's not call it a problem. Let's call it a new dynamic or whatever's happening. The underlying phenomenon. Yeah. And Ron kept explaining you can accept the phenomenon while disagreeing with your policy solutions, which they were going from, you disagree with the policy solutions, therefore why are you rejecting global warming?
Right.
And Ron was like, I'm not rejecting it. I'm just saying that your solutions aren't going to do anything. And I do have to say, in 2024, there's all these, global initiatives and stuff like that. But, probably the biggest impact is solar. A lot of these renewables are getting extremely cheap. Now, they're not going to totally replace fossil fuels, but I think we are going to see. I think Saudi Arabia, some of these other countries, they do have people there that are worried that the demand is going to drop. Probably, maybe we'll use it for fertilizer. There are obviously fossil fuels are extremely energy dense. And so I have a really hard time seeing how, unless you go to nuclear explosions or something, you're ever going to get a Starship like Starship, the space industry has to use fossil fuels, and then also you can use it for things like fertilizer. So still got utility, but we are by the end of our lives, we will probably see. Actually, give me your take. I think that cars to move, cars that move people from point to point, so they're not workhorses of some sort. They will be mostly electric by the end of our lives. Overall, there'll be some niche use cases for fossil fuel, for diesel, for gasoline, whatever. But cars seem to be one case where I think if the electrical grids are good enough, it'll be okay, right? There are other cases.
At the end of the century?
I'm talking about the 2060s,
Yeah.
At least in the developed world.
Right.
Developing world, grid issues are going to be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, electric cars, I do think are going to continue to increase. I don't actually know, will we still be using cars in 2100? That's kind of an open question. Or what will they look like? Will we?
Well, I mean, I think we will need some sort of device or some sort of
transport. Yes.
That's sealed up. That's sealed and takes us fast, right? And so, it doesn't matter if it's called a car. I think people do prefer private transportation to public because it's just annoying in most of the world. So a lot of people will use these pods. I mean, look, I'm in SF right now. Waymo's happening. It's happening in LA. It's happening in SF. It's happening in Phoenix. They're not electric. I think they're Jaguar hybrids, but I think they're not electric, but they could be electric because they're all in the city. They're not traveling long distances, and so we already have the beginnings of that revolution. So okay, you take gasoline off the must haves for like fossil fuels. That I think that releases up a lot of just a lot of the supply, and then you might have a situation. Some people don't know this, but before basically OPEC did its thing in the early 70s, oil prices were like very low, and they were like pretty flat. Like they didn't change too much. It was just like whatever. It was a totally different market. Now, like the barrel of crude oil, its price is one of those massively fluctuating things that are used to like figure out if the world economy is humming or not. High oil prices, high gasoline prices also serve as a massive tax on any economy, and so they will predict like recessions and things like that. So it's a totally different dynamic than it was in the past. And my point is, we could be going back to that dynamic if you take cars off the table. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do think if you look at like the UN, the IPCC, other things like that, the projections, we're still going to be using a fair amount of fossil fuels even by the end of the century. Now that's globally or whatever. There are some things that are easier to replace or electrify than other things, So you talked about like you could see a path for cars, but it's harder to see. You mentioned rockets. I think airplanes, just in general, it's very like you're not going to get it's like I don't think you're going to be able to get battery powered airplanes, commercial flights or whatever, unless there's some sort of radical transformation of technology. So there's some things that are.
I think the only solution, like in the far future, like there will be no fossil fuels. Although you can create fossil fuels by other inputs, but set that aside. The only other option that I've ever seen is there were back in the day there were plans for a spaceship that basically would be propelled by nuclear explosions.
Right.
And you're laughing, but that was like a real, and that could happen.
I mean, if there's like if the limit is imagination, there are lots of things like people talk about space elevators or whatnot, right? So you can imagine a lot of different stuff. But I think for the foreseeable future, we are going to continue to use a lot of fossil fuel based energy, and really, I mean there's a guy, Václav Smil, who writes a lot about this. Is very good on energy, and one thing that he points out is that like energy transitions take a long time. So even just the transition, from wood to coal, right, or as the primary energy source, it takes it's we're well into the Industrial Revolution, and wood is still the source of more energy than coal in the world, right? So things that we don't think about now. A lot of actually, the U.S. our emissions have gone down significantly over the last 20, 30 years, and especially in the electric sector. And a big part of that has nothing to do with, solar, wind, or anything like that. It's just your switch. There's been a switch from coal-based electricity to natural gas, right? Natural gas produces about half as much. It's still a fossil fuel, but it produces about half as much CO2 for the same amount of electricity as coal. So, doing that has been a big help. But you're still, that's just like a small part of the transition. We still have a significant amount of coal on the grid. We're even still mining coal in some places, and that's in the United States. I know, in Europe, there's still some coal too. So this stuff is going to happen. It will play out over a long period of time. obviously, that has implications for like, well, what do you do in terms of like climate change and emissions or whatever, And I think I mean, people talk about basically 2 or 3 types of solution, right? So there's mitigation, what's called mitigation, which is, burning less fossil fuels, doing other things doing less of stuff that puts more CO2, other, methane or whatever into the atmosphere. That's called mitigation. It's a whole list of policies and other things that people try and do that. Then there's adaptation. It's like, okay, the world's going to get warmer. So you just try and that's going to have risks and costs associated with it. So you do different things to try and adapt to that, whether it's like a giant seawall or other stuff. Right. And then a third thing, which is kind of, I don't even, it doesn't really belong in the other 2, I guess, but there's geoengineering. So there are substances in the air that trap heat and sunlight. There are particles you can put into the air that reflect heat and sunlight. And so some people have said, well, you could just put more of those types in the air to try and like balance it. This is a big controversial subject in its own right. Probably we're going to do some combination of all 3, at least definitely the first 2, and probably someone will try the third one, to some extent as well. But this is just kind of a muddle through. I mean, this is the nature of the problem is so like big. It's like, it is global and it's long term because we're talking, this stuff stays in the atmosphere for centuries, and fossil fuels, have been and continue to be. I mean, energy is just so valuable to us, and fossil fuels, historically and even now, not using fossil fuels is so costly that we can't just like quit, right? So you're going to have to like transition over a very long period of time and deal with the consequences and, try and make the best of it.
Well, so one thing that I think needs to be addressed for just like is like, and a lot of like credible. I mean, I know academics are into this, like this whole Extinction Rebellion thing, and
Right.
just like these crazy. I mean, they're crazy. They're not real, but like people still talk about them as if they are. It's we're gonna go extinct in 2030, or we're gonna go extinct because of fossil
Right.
fuels and all this stuff, which is like, no, that's not gonna happen. Also, I just want to point out to people, the Eemian interglacial 115,000 years ago was warmer than we are now. There were hippos in England back then, so subtropical climates were even further north. And so it's not like so there's all this stuff right now about how, the tropics are going to be uninhabitable, and I'm just like, okay, I just don't think that that's true. The issue is people will adapt, people will change their behavior. So for example, if you know anybody that lives in Palm Springs, they have a very, very specific way that they live. In terms of like, they get up early in the morning, they do things, and then they're inside, not out and about in the midday, and then they come back out in the evening and they go to sleep, So people in these really hot areas will have more days where they have to adapt their behavior, and that's what they're going to do. But obviously, extinction, the whole Extinction Rebellion idea, there's all these people, and I think a lot of it's fake, but some of it is like real anxiety, like, like I shouldn't have children because the world is gonna be so messed up, and all this stuff. And a lot of it is just a holdover from 20th century eco scares, climate scares.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, people did not anticipate how quickly solar would be competitive, for example. Like, that's really surprised people. So, kind of like libertarian economic argument that, the economy can provide has shown to be working in some ways. To be fair, obviously, there's things like tail risks, like more hurricanes,
Sure.
The problem is like, problems with the eco scare stuff is like, every single thing gets worse, even though they're contradictory. So it's like, there's going to be more droughts.
Right.
There's going to be more floods. And it's like, wait, if there's going to be more floods, how are there going to be more droughts? And it's just they're trying to. Yeah, you can find a model. Go on what you were saying, but you can find a model.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can like different places, and also if like the water is trapped in the air for longer. Anyway, then you could have a drought, and then it could all come down and have a flood. But yeah, I think people have a problem with the idea of something that it is a serious long-term problem, but it's not going to kill everybody in 5 years or whatever, like this is, I think and, I think this sort of, the Extinction Rebellion stuff, the Just Stop Oil, some of this stuff, like the way it gets framed, it's not surprising to me that more right-leaning people react by just like with skepticism or denying the whole thing. If you look at the like actual science, like the IPCC or other thing, scientific papers that are what the mainstream views are, right? It's not that they say climate change is not going to be a problem. They obviously do think it's going to be a problem, but it's not on the level of those people. And that gets conflated. Al Gore is not a scientist. Greta Thunberg, not a scientist. Extinction Rebellion, some of them might be scientists, but AOC is not a scientist. And so both those people themselves, and then also some of the skeptics, kind of conflate the two, right? In terms of like, Al Gore said that there would be no more snow or whatever. And still there is. So clearly the science is bunk, right? But, even though he created the internet, Al Gore is actually not a climatologist.
Yeah, I do think it's a funny, I don't know, funny, but like we should probably say, some of these activist organizations are pretty crazy in terms of just their performative protesting. Yeah. And our friend Matt Gaetz was recently, I think he wrote a pro-fracking column.
Yes.
He's become definitely a climate change pragmatist, is the way I'm going to put it.
Right.
He obviously thinks that it's not the greatest, but we can mitigate and adapt. And that's a real problem for the far left, I guess, or the ecological radicals. And they're like trying to bully him and scream at him. And a lot of this stuff, it's culturally salient, it's culturally visible, but it doesn't really have a policy effect. So these are just people are just acting out.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. Glacius lied, the planet died, I believe was the chant, which must have been kind of fun, I think. I thought you were going to mention, because with the Just Stop Oil people in general, it's so over the top that you have to wonder, like, is this secretly being funded by the oil companies, to discredit climate change activism? And I do think that Just Stop Oil is funded by the Gettys, but I don't know that, like, they're probably sincere about it. I don't know. But I do wonder sometimes, like, some activism is just like, not only do I not think that you're helping your cause, but it's so obvious that you are hurting your cause that it makes me question, like, what your own thinking is, like what you think your strategy is for this stuff.
Well, I mean, so the Gettys, you bring up the Gettys, just so people know, the Gettys were a family that's really involved in oil in places like California. So it's an oil fortune, but now the current generation of Gettys, and, I think they're 3 or 4 generations out from the, ones who made the money. A lot of them are very liberal activist types, and they are giving a lot of money to a lot of these climate activists. So it's a little weird, but, whatever.
And they formed the Jazz Fleet. Yeah. That's
on the what?
It's a Leonard Cohen reference. People can look it up.
Okay. Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground in listening listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspects of the